how does a leader decide, okay, this person we're going to invest in heavily. This person here, they need to stay at the line level. Need to stay at the vertical level. How do we discern from a talent management perspective, what the right decision is?
Welcome to the Value Factory Podcast, brought to you by OneAccord. We're all about helping businesses thrive and grow through leadership, strategy, and meaningful impact. Now, whether you're a seasoned executive or just starting out, our goal is to provide insights and inspiration to help you navigate your journey. Thanks for tuning in.
All right, here we are for a virtual edition of the Value Factory Podcast. Welcome, everyone. Please join me in welcoming Julie Williamson. And if I say this, Carrickans Group CEO.
That's it. Yeah, you got it.
All right. And so Julie and I are new friends by way of our affiliation with Collective 54, which we can go into that story at some point. But for now, Julie, maybe just share with our listeners a little bit about you and Carrickans and
Yeah.
who you are, what you do, what's important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the CEO of Carrickans Group. We're a small boutique consultancy. We focus on helping leaders make how matter. That's the name of our best-selling book that we recently released on Amazon. And it's also just our enduring passion at our company. We know that a lot of organizations spend a lot of time and money on what to do. So they have their strategies in place or big transformation plans. They know why they need to do it. They might have a purpose or a mission or a vision they're fulfilling, or they might have a market threat they're responding to or a competitive threat. They know their why. So they know their what and their why, but they haven't figured out how to do it together. And at Carrickans Group, we really believe that when leaders figure out how to lead their organizations together, they make amazing things happen. And so that's the story behind Carrickans Group. For me, it brings together my background in consulting, in business, and also in social science to really think about how organizationally we can convert on those ambitious strategies and we can meet those high ambitions and we can bring them to life. So that's what gets me excited. That's a little bit about Carrickans Group. I'm happy to share more about my leadership journey as well, if that's helpful, but I'll pause there.
Love it. Love it. And I'm just imagining your TED Talk. But I say, have you done a TED Talk yet?
I have not done a TED Talk, no.
My gosh, you're next up. Because we got Simon Sinek says, start with why. And
Yeah.
you would say, make how matter.
Right. Exactly. I think it is important to know your why. It's important to know what you're doing. But if you don't take some time and put some effort towards knowing how to do it together as a team, then you will have suboptimal results.
How did you arrive at that conclusion? What makes you
Yeah.
believe that?
Do you know, I spent the first part of my career with a very large systems integrator, building systems that support what is now the mobile phone industry. So a lot in communication. We were doing a lot of startups in Europe, also doing conversions from existing fixed wire telephony into mobile telephony. So I got to see a lot about ambitious business plans coming to life as the mobile phone industry through the 90s took shape. It was an amazing learning experience for me. And then I got the second part of my career, which was more focused on strategy, organizational change, things like that. And somewhere in that mix, I realized that I knew an awful lot about technology. I knew a lot about business. I have an MBA with a concentration in finance. I had a lot of the technical background, but I could not for the life of me figure out why companies or teams within companies weren't able to do what they knew they needed to do. So I went back to school in my late 30s and got my PhD in a social science in organizational communication. And that helped me to look at business in a completely different way. And it really guided what became the third part of my career, which has been at Carrickans Group, and really thinking about not just what's the business solution, but also what's the leadership solution, and not through the lens of change management, but through the lens of activation. How do we activate leaders to do the work they need to do the hard things?
There are three things that you said in there that I want to lean into a bit. Double click into is the new language, I think. Observing teams, I think you said just not being able to do the things that they want to do.
Hmm.
the good idea, to get the good idea. So do you have an example of that? Like something that you saw firsthand that, you can unpack and say like, here's why it didn't work and here's how
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
I mean, pick any transformation off the shelf, right? 70% of them fail to return on their investment. And I think that that's really telling. I think, in my experience, one great example that has shown up, I won't tell you the exact client, but shows up across the board, is when a client was trying to change their go to market strategy pretty significantly. They wanted to go from product only sales to product and solution sales. So, solution selling looks very different, right? Than
Mm,
the churn and burn of a product sale. So you have a different, just by means of example, different lifespan. So it might take 3 days to close a product and it takes 30 days to close a solution. And I'm making these numbers up, right?
mhm,
But in order for a sales force to be successful in that new strategy, because you have a different go to market strategy that you're implementing, the leadership team across the company has to understand what that change is going to take from them, not from their salespeople. Because, leaders love to change what other people do, they do not like to change how they lead. Right? And that's a
yeah,
problem.
I'm
Yeah.
with you there.
I mean, I'm that way, I think.
I'm going through a bit of an
Yeah.
existential crisis myself, in this, OneAccord, my firm. How about this? I've recognized, because people have told me and I've chosen to believe them, that what got us here is not going to get us there. And my first approach was, well, then I need to change as the leader. And I'm referring to it amongst, my team as Nick 2.0, that
I love
my
that.
leadership got us here, but I need to evolve. And then I was told by one of my senior leaders, well, it's not just Nick 2.0, it's OneAccord 2.0. I thought, oh, well, that's interesting.
Yeah. And what that means for the company is that how you lead together as a leadership team needs to change. So
Mm,
you might have, as Nick 1.0 in the founder startup mode, really given people a long leash. I'm using this again as an example, right? Where everybody just, these are the numbers you need to hit, go hit them. So lots of autonomy, lots of localized decision making, or maybe you made all the decisions. So everything had to come back through you. Those are examples of how you lead, but also how the leadership team works together. And
hmm.
that all has to change if you're going to, it can't just be Nick 2.0. It has to be OneAccord 2.0, but also from a leadership team perspective, you and your colleagues have to figure out your new ways of working together to bring your new strategy to life.
It's like you were sitting in on our last leadership conversation. I mean, you're speaking right into it. That long leash, a lot of autonomy. I make all the decisions, kind of thing, and we're evolving. And I've just taken the perspective that in order for us to get there, I have to change first, because I have to be able to let go of making the decisions, and I also have to be willing to hold people accountable sooner, right? Shorter on that leash than, so those
Yeah.
things start.
You just hit something, Nick, that so many of the leadership teams that we work with talk about, and that's accountability. And everybody loves to say, we need to hold each other accountable. But what they really mean is hold other people accountable. Right? But it's also really hard for a leader like you to move into a higher accountability leader
Yeah,
because you have built your company on friendships and on long-standing relationships, and injecting firm accountability into that dynamic can fundamentally alter the relationship in ways that leaders find very uncomfortable.
very uncomfortable. It's scary.
Yeah.
Like it I
Can the
almost,
relationship stand it?
I feel a sense of loss even before going there. It's like an anticipatory sense of loss
Yeah.
of relationship. It's very real.
Yeah.
So there was that kind of observation of, we've got a good idea, but we don't seem to get it done. Um, and then, but you talked about your PhD. Did you say in social science and in communication? So how
Yeah.
does that come
Organizational
into,
communication.
yeah, an MBA with a finance focus, and now we're, you know, going into the people business?
Yeah. It was a huge learning for me. It taught me to ask different questions and to look for different things in the business context. So there is the theoretical dimension of it, right? Which where you look at things like rhetoric and you look at how people connect and symbols and rituals that they use and all of those types of things. But more practically speaking, in the business environment, when you bring that social science lens, you start to ask different questions about how are we transforming this company? What is our strategy? What does that mean for us as humans that are trying to execute and deliver on those kinds of plans? And when you infuse the leadership team with that perspective, they start to lead in more effective ways because they are bringing the team together more intentionally around very specific ways of working that help them deliver on what they say they want to do and why they want to do it.
What's an example of an ineffective way? So if you're saying those are more effective, what's an example of the ineffective way that leadership teams go about affecting change?
Yeah, one of them is when the leadership team itself is disconnected. So we've had clients where, for example, the sales goals, the operations goals, and the product development goals are just in conflict with each other.
Hmm.
So instead of at a leadership level saying, how can we have goals that motivate our teams and also get us towards our enterprise results that we're trying to get to? Instead, they're leading vertically and they're only caring about whether or not within their own organization they're hitting the numbers and the metrics. And then you dig down and you realize those metrics are in conflict with each other. Salespeople are, I don't know, compensated to get things sold quickly. Well, what's the easiest way to sell a product quickly? You customize it, right? Well, the
Hmm.
product team is saying, well, we can't do customizations. And that's an old song and dance, right? Between product and sales. Those kinds of things are misalignments, right? The leader at the very top of the organization, the leadership team is not aligned on strategically how are we going to generate revenue.
Hmm. And so then the better approach to that,
Yeah, I think
how do you do that right?
it starts with knowing that negotiating the level of customization in that example that a salesperson is able to offer in order to close a contract, it requires culturally within the organization a really good understanding of what those compromises mean for the long-term value of that revenue as well as the short-term value of that revenue and creating transparency around that. And that starts all the way up at the top of the food chain with the head of sales and the head of product being seen by the organization as being in support of each other and not in conflict with each other.
Hmm.
And I'm sure, Nick, you can think about plenty of examples of organizations you've worked with where that conflict is very real between product and sales.
Yeah.
And so the better aligned they are at the top, the better that trickles down to every single person in the organization understanding what is our strategy when it comes to revenue and how does that how does that influence our product strategy. And when you start to look at that through a social science lens, you start to see all the moves people are making to protect themselves or to reward themselves or to create recognition, like all of these things that are happening that are related to the business, but they're distinctly part of the human experience in the organization.
Yeah. The protect oneself, the reward one's self, very, very human nature.
Yeah. And no matter what the strategy says, if you're not looking at those things, then you're not going to get as much out of your strategy as you would like.
Hmm. Um, what have you seen that's effective for communicating that strategy down the line, getting the water to the end of the row if we're using the
Yeah.
agriculture analogy? How best to do that?
I don't know about you, but I have been in so many executives' offices and they're like, we have a strategy. It's right here. And in, the 90s, they would pull a binder off the shelf and blow the dust off of it. Today, they're looking around on the shared drive for it. It's here somewhere. We paid only 7 million for it. We've got this great strategy. But I think the most important thing for me for strategy, look, strategy is not that complicated, right? Like typically, I don't mean to sound disrespectful around that. There's a lot of hard work that goes into really understanding market drivers. But at the end of the day, what you're communicating to the organization, you should be able to put it on a page or two. And it
Hmm.
should be front and center for everybody every day as they're making decisions. so that they know how to make decisions through the lens of a strategy. And I think too often we focus on telling people what the strategy is and not telling them how to use the strategy to make effective decisions.
Mm.
And when you don't go that extra step, you lose the value of having the strategy.
And that is at the kind of at the crux of why you exist, is in that
Yeah,
how
how
to use that
matters.
strategy.
Yeah. And how to work together on it.
What are some things that you would do, that you would bring into an organization to help affect or to help make more effective their how?
Yeah. The first work that we typically do is with the senior leadership team. And in mid to large size company, that might be with the C suite, it might be with the team that leads a functional area or a product line or a sales team, for example. But we're working with those leaders whose job it is to connect across the enterprise. So enterprise level leaders. And by the way, when we look at career paths for people,
Hmm.
the biggest step up is to move from being a team leader, a vertical leader, into enterprise level leadership and to have to start connecting the dots across the business. And so many leaders stumble at that point. People's careers stall out at that point. That's why people are,
Why do you
lifetime
think
middle
that is?
managers. I think because it's really hard. And, we talk about doing the hard things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
Where
is what's hard about it?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with identity, right? So if you are a really, really good team leader for, I don't know, a development team for a particular product, and you came up in that product organization and you know everything there is to know about that product, and it's your area of expertise, right? So you have that badge with you. And now you're stepping into an enterprise level role where all of that identity doesn't matter as much because if you don't understand the whole enterprise, then you're not as effective as the person sitting next to you who does understand the whole enterprise. And
Hmm.
you have been, for the last 10 years, you've been rewarded for being an expert in that product. And
Yeah.
you have to be able to let go of that identity and start to learn again at that enterprise level leadership. And people have a really hard time making that transition.
Would you suggest, or I don't know, would you agree or disagree that not everyone is capable of making that
Yeah,
transition?
I think that's right. There are people who are going to be really, really good at vertical leadership and at always maintaining the expertise and the diligence and the delivery capability of a particular part of the organization. But enterprise leadership might be a step too far. I think that also, unfortunately, a lot of people who could take that step aren't given the training and the support and the mentorship that they need to be able to do that effectively.
I imagine myself projecting my own kind of values, interests, orientation onto others and just assuming, well, of course, everybody would want to be at that enterprise level. And of course, it makes sense that when a person transitions from vertical to enterprise, they're looking now holistically and, less of me, more of we, but maybe that isn't the case. And so some just aren't inclined that way, but others who might be aren't given the support and the training, as you just said. How long do you think it takes to develop someone's skill and ability, capacity to go from vertical to enterprise level? Is that, 90 days, 2 years? What do you think?
If only there was a recipe, right? And then we would crack the code. I mean, David Guest started writing about T-shaped leadership back in the 90s, and we're still talking about this like transition to horizontal leadership. It's very difficult. But I do think there are people that are naturally inclined to it, maybe like yourself. And there are other people who are really, they have an intrinsic reward system around expertise. And so being the expert in a particular area is how they're wired. And it might also be an area that gives them a lot of joy,
Mm.
right? Like a really good developer should be allowed to be a really good developer and maybe not be a team leader, right? Like there needs to be a track for people to move forward on that where they can develop expertise. and not have to be thinking more broadly about the business. That's okay. You need those people. But for the people who have that natural inclination to say, I want to know more about the enterprise, not more about my discipline, those are the people who I think you can tap on the shoulder and say, hey, let's talk about enterprise leadership and what it really means. One of the hardest things for people to learn about being an enterprise leader is sometimes you have to take the hit for the team, right? Sometimes it's your organization that has to give up budget or headcount or isn't going to get the investment to do the next great thing in your area. And you have to see those hard decisions through the context of the enterprise lens and be able to bring your team along knowing that they're going to struggle because of a hard decision that was made at the enterprise level. And you have to be able to authentically own that decision as part of the enterprise leadership team. Too often I see people say, oh, well, that came from corporate. Well, you're corporate.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Isn't that right?
right.
Boy, how would I say this? I think I had that perspective. So I was a young leader. I started my career before what I'm doing now. I was 25 years working in banks, large national banks, community banks, local, regional, etc. I was an assistant manager when I was 19 years old. That was my kind of first foray
Wow.
into management leadership. I was promoted into roles based on potential, but always too soon, too young. I was immature. I was always immature. Although my thinking was right, my behavior wasn't right. So I could say that for so many instances, I just didn't have the executive presence that was necessary. And so there were some opportunities I think that could have come my way for enterprise level roles in larger banks. I did sit on senior leadership teams in smaller banks, but I'd say executive presence was the thing that held me back. The company's invested a lot in my training and development, but just not in that particular area until kind of one of the last banks that I worked for hired an executive coach and provided me with that kind of executive coaching. So if there isn't a magic formula, like, how much resource investment should we consider making, and how does a leader decide, okay, this person we're going to invest in heavily. This person here, they need to stay at the line level. Need to stay at the vertical level. How do we discern from a talent management perspective, what the right decision is?
Yeah, first of all, I'm so glad that you were able to get value out of an executive coaching relationship. I think those are so important. I do a lot of executive coaching, and it's an opportunity for somebody to really lean in and learn that skill of gravitas. How do you hold the room? How do you have that bigger picture and be able to show it to other people effectively? And I do think that is a skill that many people can learn if they have the right support around them. But it's hard to know that you need to learn it unless somebody is willing to tell you
Yeah.
and willing to invest in you.
Yeah, so that's now the seat that I'm in, where I'm observing people on my team, and gosh, there are, and this, if they hear this episode and they hear me say this, they're going to be disappointed in me. But I see things, and I think, gosh, you could have done that better. But I
Yeah.
don't always tell them
Yeah.
for
Feedback
one
is a
reason or
gift, right?
another. What's that?
Feedback is a gift.
I like to believe that, and it's a tough gift to deliver sometimes.
Yeah. Tough to deliver and tough to get, right?
Yeah. Although on the flip side, I'm that person that says, give me all of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because I want to improve. And yet I'm reticent to do the same.
You asked about investment in people.
Mhm.
And I would say that one of the things that you should be looking for as an executive in an organization as you look at that next generation of leaders is look for the people who are curious.
Hmm.
The people who are curious about the whole business, the people who are curious about themselves. So they're asking for feedback, they're asking you to help them to get better. And the people who are leaning in to building their connections across the business with different people and also their understanding of different topics. At Carrickans Group, when we talk about connections, we don't just mean people. We also mean that you're connecting with the business more broadly and understanding, taking the time to understand the business in different ways. So I would look for those self starters, those people who are being really curious, who are asking for feedback. They're asking to meet different people, to have time to spend with other parts of the business. And they're actively looking to curate the skills and the insights that will help them to be enterprise leaders.
That is super helpful. Really hope folks listening replay that. Look for those who are curious. Julie, tell me more about your book, the book. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I have a copy of it right here. I'll show you. There's the title.
Make how matter.
Yeah. Make how matter. One of the things that I really want for enterprise leaders, for senior leaders in all organizations is I want them just to be thinking about how you lead matters. And so, as I started out this conversation, we know that a lot of organizations know what to do and why, but they probably haven't spent the right amount of time and resources on understanding how to lead together. And so, this book unpacks a lot of our IP and methodologies and approaches and content. You get great tools and resources along with it to really just start to think about how could we lead better. And I wanted to make the content available to the world because I believe that strongly in it. I think it is so important that leaders start to grab onto this idea and they start to not only have their what and their why, as Simon Sinek says, but also they know how to lead together. And if companies can do that, I know that they will exceed their own expectations, much less the expectations of the market in terms of growth. We've seen that with clients of ours. So the book is a great resource for anyone who is how curious, right? So you're thinking about I'm a little curious about what that means and what that could do for us. You can crack it open. You can go through it kind of section by section, or you can skip around. Lots of tools and resources available that come with it, worksheets, things like that that you can try with your team. So I'm really excited for people to check it out and to take a look at it and to try some of the work that's in there. It
Are the
it
are
is
the
not easy
worksheets
to do on your own, but it's there for you.
in the book or those accompany the book?
There are copies of them in the book, but there are also digital copies available to everybody
Cool.
through a QR code that's in the book.
Yeah. Not easy to do on your own, as you say. It's like, I don't know if you'll get this reference, but it's like somebody reads the book Traction and they try to implement EOS on their own.
Exactly.
Not easy to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Traction is a great resource for small business owners who are trying to build out a more disciplined approach to running and growing their business, right?
Hmm.
And it provides you with all of the tools and resources that you need. And it is also oftentimes very helpful to tap someone on the shoulder who's an expert at implementing it.
And so who are the clients that you work with? Who's your favorite client? Maybe not by
Yeah.
name, but
Yeah. We have just the great privilege of working with some truly amazing clients. Typically our clients are around 200 million to 2 billion in revenue, which kind of has that requisite complexity at an enterprise level to need to lead together, but they're not so big that they are frozen, right? We do have clients who are bigger than that and smaller than that, but that's kind of our sweet spot. And I would say our favorite clients are the ones who either start with or develop a high EQ. Kind of this idea of emotional intelligence to really get clear on how to lead together. You have to be willing to start to think about your colleagues, your business, and your leadership team through the human lens and not just through the business lens, not exclusively of each other, but with an intersection of the two. And that's what we try to do with the teams that we work with. And the ones that have the most success with our work and then later with their businesses are the ones who will intersect that business and human perspective.
so intersecting the human and business perspective. What's a tangible or visible outcome and output of that
Yeah.
a client has implemented or changed or done?
Yeah. We had one client who had a way of working that they came up with it through the work that we did with them around ruthless prioritization. They just like when we started, they had, 40 different top priorities and as many companies do, right? And this idea that as a leadership team, so the most senior level people, it was the CEO and his 8 or 9 direct reports. They had 5 or 6 different ways of working that they wanted to shift for themselves. And one of them was this idea of ruthless prioritization. And so they started to shift how they had their meetings, which they probably met monthly as a team, and really bringing this idea of, are we prioritizing ruthlessly?
Mm,
And for whatever reason, that adjective stuck with them. And so it just really worked well. That's the other thing. Ways of working can sound trite or they can sound whatever to outsiders, but for the people who've created meaning around what that is, it's really powerful. So they would go through their meetings and looking at different investments and looking at where they were spending their time. And their question to each other was always, are we ruthlessly prioritizing? And they had to make some really hard decisions about where to put their limited resources. And by always looking at it through that lens, this is how we work together. As a leadership team, we are willing to ruthlessly prioritize. It changed their conversations so that they made more targeted and more strategic investments on a more regular basis. And the result of that was the organization got clear on what truly the priorities were, and then over the course of about a year, they really changed the whole, I will say, I don't want to say the culture of the organization, but the way that the organization made decisions, not just how the leadership team made decisions, started to very consistently be through, does this support our strategic priorities? Not, can I like contort it around until it fits into one of our strategic
yeah,
priorities, right?
yeah.
Because that's not ruthlessly prioritizing. And so they stopped all the contortions and they started getting super clear on how they were making decisions together and what they were prioritizing. So for me, that was a really great example of the impact and the power of doing this work. If somebody had just gone in there and said, I can't tell you, they had probably for years been saying to each other, we really need to do better with prioritization. We
Hmm.
really need to prioritize better, right? And
Yeah.
everybody would be like, yeah, 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 we do. We got to do better. I bet, do you ever say that, Nick? Like, we really
Well,
need to
seriously,
prioritize better.
this is so elucidating for me in that I can't tell you in this moment how we operate as a leadership team. Someone would have to tell me from the outside how they observe us operating.
Mm,
It's that old thing where it's you can't hard to read the label from the inside of the pickle jar
exactly,
because
exactly.
we haven't been thoughtful or intentional about it.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah,
prioritization, I feel pretty comfortable with that. Accountability,
yeah,
this here again, the word, it's a word that's used, but its meaning is different to everyone that's using it, and again, different to everyone that's hearing it. Um, and I'm not sure I want to put ruthless in front of accountability,
no, don't do that.
but there
Yeah,
is some,
yeah.
is that an adjective that
Authentic,
goes in front?
right?
Yeah.
Authentic accountability. I mean, accountability, I would say accountability, collaboration, prioritization, decision making. Those are probably 4 of the biggest things that we work with leadership teams on.
Mm, so
And
good.
it is about creating shared meaning. No one can tell you what accountability should be for you and your team, and you can't figure it out yourself. And you will fail if you just go in a dark room and try and think about it, right? And come back out with the answer. You
Hmm.
have to do it in dialogue with your team so that you all develop a shared meaning of what accountability looks and feels like for this team. That's how we hold each other accountable to doing what we say we're going to do and why we're doing it.
I'm inspired to encourage slash require everyone on my team to watch this conversation, at least this part of this conversation, before we go into a team meeting and agree on what accountability means for us and how we're going to do that around our organization. Now, I'm sure that that's an example of one of the outcomes that folks might enjoy after working with you and Carrickans Group is getting clear on what ruthless prioritization is, or in our case, however we're going to approach accountability. What other I don't know, artifacts or evidence of a company that makes how matter? Like how do we know we're looking at an organization that really does make the how matter?
Yeah. One of the things that we always encourage our clients to realize is that this is not a catalytic event. Deciding
Mm.
in your case what accountability looks like. That's not something you decide in a 1 hour conversation and then everybody magically goes and does it, right?
That's too bad. I
So
was
I
looking
know.
forward to that, Julie.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, everybody wants it to be more catalytic than it is. But the way that we know that teams have really shifted how they work together is when they, first of all, craft the language they want to use, which is a lot of the work that we do with them. And then they start over time to hold themselves, to use your word, accountable to what we call small shifts or nudges in a different direction. So, what are the small things you can do differently over time so that you start to lead differently as a team? And we do accountability assessments and things like that to help them see through a more quantitative perspective what that looks like. But I think more importantly is that when teams start to use the language that they've crafted and they start to bring that into sort of their natural cadence. So at Carrickans Group, we have 6 ways of working. One of them is in pursuit of better. So we use that all the time. If you talk to someone from Carrickans Group and you ask them, what we're doing right now, what are you doing around AI? We're in pursuit of better around that. We're trying to figure it out. We know we're not going to be perfect, but we're always trying to get better at how we integrate technology into our solutions.
So
This is one
smart.
example. Yeah.
You,
So that's something that we hold really dear,
yeah.
and we know exactly what that means for us. It might mean
And that
something
was
different for you.
one of six.
Yeah.
What are the other five?
We have create the space. A lot of the work we do is about creating the space for quality conversations. And so we are always working to make sure internally and with our clients that we're creating that space for great things to happen. And again, for us, that has meaning, right? We know exactly what that means. And we have a way of working around kindred. So, how we support each other, what it looks like to be a part of Carrickans Group. We have 2 around commercial savvy and delivery excellence that are really about how we run the business and how we work with clients. So we can go around these different areas. And when you're internal to Carrickans Group, all of those things mean something to you. They won't mean something to people who are outside until they get to know us a little better. But a lot of people actually adopt our language pretty quickly. We put it out on the website. If you go out to carricansgroup.com and you go under Meet Carrickans, you'll see how we roll,
Hmm.
and it has it all laid out for you. So we don't hide it. It's not secret. We put it out there for the world, but it informs what it means to both work internally at Carrickans Group and to work with Carrickans Group as a company.
Oh, I love it. I love it. This is it's a fun conversation, Julie.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious for you with your company, what if you had, so sometimes people think in terms of values or they think in terms of purpose, kind of purpose aligned, those kinds of things. Those are almost a level more abstract than what we do. We get into what we call ways of working or powerful hows.
Yeah, for sure. So purpose for us is we would say building value built on values. So the purpose of OneAccord is to create enterprise value that didn't exist before we became involved. Some of the examples of that would be an owner that is attempting to sell their company, but they can't because I don't know, there are operational concerns, there's financial concerns, there's revenue concerns. And so we might work with them for a year or two, get them to a place where they sell, and then they've created enterprise value. It could be an enterprise value an increase. We helped a company, a family business that attempted to sell. They were given an offer of $75 million, but the structure of the offer was not ideal. It was 25 million in cash and 50 million earned out over 5 years amongst a family that just didn't necessarily want to be in business for 5 more years. So that just didn't fit. We worked with them for about 18 months, took them back to market, and they were given $100 million all cash offer. So building value, enterprise value is really kind of our purpose, but we say building value built on values. I would say up until today's conversation, that had a lot to do with our how, right? So our core values that have existed, my partner Jeff started the company 25 years ago, and these values begin with the founder, and he and I are values aligned, so that's very helpful for succession. But our 3 core values are truth, compassion, and service. And so we would say this is how we show up truthfully, delivering truth to owners and executives with compassion, because truth delivered without compassion isn't necessarily effective, and compassion without truth isn't necessarily effective. This is how we've made sense of these things. But we don't have a clearly defined kind of MO, right? Our how. And I want for there to be a a shared understanding of accountability. I want for there to be a shared understanding of excellence in delivery. I know that these are things that we all agree on. We talk about them frequently, but we don't have a shared language around it. And we don't have a commitment to this how. We use our core values as a filter for folks that we would bring on the team, for sure. And we're clear about, why we exist. We're very clear on what we do. In fact, that's been the work of my kind of 2 years in as CEO, has been really clarifying what we do by way of clarifying what we don't do, right? Back to your, it's very easy to sell things quickly when you customize everything.
Right.
But if everything's custom, then we don't have a product or a service. Right. So those things I've been clear on, but back to making how matter here again, this conversation elucidates a real opportunity for us, I think, to go forward, even in that context of OneAccord 2. Nick 2.0 as a leader. That's very helpful.
Yeah. It's a great example actually when we oftentimes we see values that are a little bit more in the why than in the how. And so you think about truth and compassion. And then if you think about how, as leaders, do we want to have a culture of accountability in this organization? You want that to be informed by your values, your commitment to truth and compassion. But how you do that as leaders needs to be a click down from that, right? It's a
Mm,
little too abstract to really understand what does accountability mean, not what does truth and compassion mean, right? But whatever you decide to do from an accountability perspective, however you define that, it should fit within your values of truth and compassion. So it doesn't have to be something different, but it
yeah.
can inform your leadership team in a different way.
In fact, it has to be aligned. If we were to, I was to say ruthless accountability, it'd be
Doesn't
like,
fit.
well, how does that fit with compassion and
That's right.
service, right? Like
That's
maybe
right.
truth, but not really. So we're not a ruthless organization.
That's right.
We're absolutely results driven, but ruthless just isn't in our
It
vernacular.
doesn't work for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, like I use that example, it worked for that client.
Well,
It
and
doesn't
I would
work for
say
everyone.
as an individual,
Yeah.
I can get behind that
Yeah.
ruthless prioritization. Like if I
Yeah.
did more of that in my personal life, oh my gosh, what a gift that would be. So I'm not, not against, but just in the context of the culture and in our organization and kind of, it just,
That's right.
so these things, they have to align. That's
Yeah. And
important.
that only happens through dialogue and it only happens over time. When I said it's not a catalytic event, you can't just decide in one meeting that that's what accountability is going to look like around here. So now we're all
Hey,
going to go do that.
you're breaking my heart, Julie, because I
I
was going to
know.
plan that meeting for next Friday.
I know. Right. Well, you can have that meeting, but understand that it's a start, it's not an end.
Yeah.
And you have to keep having small conversations over time. We always say small things done consistently over time change the world.
Hmm.
So if you can just shift some small things around accountability and do that over the next 18 months, you're going to get so much further than if you have some big grand plan for completely retooling how the leadership team does accountability
Yeah.
and nobody ever does it.
Yeah. It's like, do I just cut 300 calories a day out of my diet, or do I
Exactly.
go on a 5-day fast and then
Yeah. And
bounce
hope for
back,
the
right?
best.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, I've done a couple Ironmans in my day.
Really?
That's a long day, right?
Wow.
And how do you start training for an Ironman? You get up one day and you run a mile,
Hmm.
right? Like that's what you do. I mean, obviously if you're a professional athlete, I guess you do different things, but you just have to get started, right? But if you do it consistently over time,
Yeah.
when the event day comes, you're going to do all right.
I am even more impressed. Triathletes are a rare breed as far
Yeah.
as I'm concerned.
I don't consider myself a competitor and I don't consider them races. Think that I am a participant in an event. So,
Well, even that is something to be
yeah.
celebrated. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
job. Good
But
job.
like I said, my only point in mentioning is that you do the small things and the big things happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point to wrap up on.
Yeah.
Before we do, I just want to ask if you have any closing thoughts or anything that, we didn't cover you want to go a little further into.
I would just say, start or I would end where we started, which is to say that if you are a leader and you are looking to really take your team to the next level, spending some time on how you lead together as a team can really be an accelerator for you towards what you want to do and why you want to do it. So think about it as potentially a missing piece on your team, and have the conversations with your teammates about what would it look like if how we led together was more consistent, was better defined, was better understood by all of us and by the rest of the organization. And how would that change where we're headed in the next 3 to 5 years? And I think you will discover that there are some really incredible gains to be had by taking the time to make how matter.
Yeah, it's so good. And Carrickans Group, if somebody wants to find you, would you spell that for us so we get it right
Yeah,
in the URL?
it is Karrkins group, GROUP, all one word, .com.
And Make How Matter, that's available
Yep,
on Amazon, I'm sure.
yep, yep. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kindle, all of your big outlets.
Awesome. So good. Well, Julie, thank you for visiting us on the Value Factory. I think this has been an excellent, excellent conversation that a lot of folks can find value from. And I'm pretty sincere. I want to make a strong encouragement slash requirement for everybody on my team to listen through this. I think there's some nuggets that they can take away, and even some things they might learn, about my perspective and what we're thinking. And that can be great. So thank you.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to the Value Factory. We look forward to seeing you, hearing you in the comments. Thanks for tuning in.